throughout the videos that I've done so far, there's a couple of times that I mentioned filing conventions and saving your files. And this video is going to be a little bit about that. And I'm going to explain to you the importance of keeping older versions. Now, for a client, let's look at this particular book that I'm working on now. This is an old client of mine. I did a cookbook for her several years ago, and she came back because she wanted to do a new book. And this book is a pretty complex interior job. I'm sorry. It's morning. It's early. It's a 8x10 book, so it's fairly large, and it has a ton of pictures. It has a ton of bulleted lists, and I set it in columns, and we have some special text boxes and things of that nature. So if I had to redo it because of a file error, it would be a huge pain in the butt. Now, what would cause you to have to redo a book like that? Well, software is glitchy, and InDesign is just one of those programs that can be super glitchy. And sometimes it'll just crash for no reason. Unfortunately, it's always been the nature of InDesign that sometimes there's just errors, and it just, something happens and the file goes bad. So case in point today, I had a few edits to do. We're trying to get this uploaded to Ingram Spark today, and I had a few edits that she wanted me to do last minute. So I went through, did the edits, saved it, and exported it as a PDF and sent her the revised file. And she comes back and said, all the images are missing. And I'm like, what? So I pull up the file and I export it again, not really paying attention. Images are still missing. I'm like, okay, what happened? Took me a minute, but out of the blue, suddenly all the images were completely gone. And I've never had this particular issue happen. There was just some sort of hiccup, and InDesign just decided that it was no longer going to bring in my images. Now, when I open up the file, they're back in there. But I even rebooted my computer and they still weren't in there. So what I did is I went back to a previous saved version, made the updates again, and then exported the file, and it worked just fine. So just know that these little glitches happen, and although the file is working properly now, if I was on a deadline, which I was, and I wasn't able to restore them, then that causes problems. So what I recommend is keeping every single file you create until a certain point, and don't ever save over that one file. Okay, don't keep going with one file. Okay, that's where you're going to lead to multiple issues. So if you look at the interior folder for this client, let's go ahead and close both of these out. You will notice repeatedly I have all of these files in here. All right, so that's a lot of files. And if you look at the size, these are some pretty big files which can really take space. So lesson number one. Now, if you're an author and you're only creating a couple of InDesign documents at a time, it's not going to be a big deal for file storage. However, if you are a person offering formatting to others, it is important that you have storage. All right. If your hard drive is small, invest in a large external hard drive to save all your files. All right. And also make sure you have some sort of backup system in case of hard drive failure. Those are very important things if you are running this as a business. All right. Now, me personally, I have an 8 terabyte NAS drive. All right, so it is a network drive. I don't even have it near my computer. I have a fully networked home. So I have Ethernet cables in every room, and I have a network cabinet. And my hard drive is stored in that network cabinet. So no matter what computer I'm on, I can access that NAS drive because it is hooked into my network. Now, I can also access that NAS drive externally. So if I'm at a coffee shop and I need a file on the NAS drive, I can log in and download it. It's a great thing to have. And the beauty about this NAS drive is that it has an auto backup. It's actually a 2-disk system. So there is one 8 terabyte hard drive. There's 2 8-terabyte hard drives. One that I write the files to and one that backs up the first. All right, so I have a constant backup with that. Now, you may not need something that complex. Just keep in mind, I have been doing this for many, many years. I also have built up a ton of graphic resources, so file storage is very important to me. But I definitely recommend having an external drive, whether you work on a laptop or a big monster computer like I do. You want that external drive. Now, with the holidays coming up, you could probably find some pretty decent external drives for, $100, $200, or maybe even cheaper depending on your file storage. I always recommend going with a large one. All right, now I have 8 gigs. 8 terabytes. In your lifetime, you may never need 8 terabytes. But for me, it's better to be safe than sorry and run out of storage space. And then you have to figure out, oh, what files am I going to delete? File storage, with these external drives coming down in price, such a great amount, it is essential to make sure you have those files. Now, back in the day, this is really showing my age, file sizes were not quite to the extreme as they are today. And we didn't have the ability, some printers had the ability to FTP, File Transfer Protocol. That'll show you my age. And it's basically where they had a connection to their server that you could go in and upload your print files, and then they would go in and download it and print your job. Today, you don't see that often. There's a couple of printers that I work with that still use that method, but that's really not as common. Most people use some sort of file transfer system like Dropbox, or I typically prefer Adobe's Creative Cloud because they have a little thing in Outlook. I use Outlook for email, and the great thing about using the I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. The Adobe Creative Cloud through Outlook is I have this add-on for Outlook that all I have to do is click Attach File via Link, and I choose the file that I want to send, and it gets uploaded to my Creative Cloud on Adobe, and then the client can go in and download it. This is what I use to deliver all my files, and it is a great tool. And I do have to go in and clean up every couple of months some of the older files and remove them from the cloud just for storage, because with Creative Cloud, it's not a lifetime supply of storage. So that's something that you do have to keep in mind. But to me, it works better with Dropbox. Google Drive is good too. I actually have storage space through Google Drive, and if I'm working on a client job that has multiple files, I will often set up a Google Drive folder and move all the files in there and share that folder with them. So that's always a good option. But if it's just 1 or 2 files, I prefer using Adobe Creative Cloud through Outlook. So I can just send the link and then they can go and download it. All right, so going back to the file structure, and the whole point of this video is that you'll see that all of these files, let me get back in, where am I at? All of these files, this takes up a lot of space. So because I have such a large external drive, I never worry about deleting these out. But if you ever do come across where you need storage space, I would get rid of all of your drafts. All right. So if we look at this, you'll look at the breakdown. Let me move that one because that one doesn't even belong there. These are my concept files that I created for her at the very beginning. So I'm going to create a folder called Concepts. Now I'm just cleaning this folder up. So I'm going to move all of these files into the concept folder. And then these draft files, I really don't need anymore, but I like to keep them around just in case. All right, so I am going to move, because I'll always have backup with the client, and just in case a file goes corrupt, like it did today. So my final 3 went corrupt today. All my images are missing. So what I did is I went back to my final 02, which is the previous version I did for her. I redid the updates, which were probably about 20 edits that I had to redo again. And then I was able to save it and create another PDF with the images. So that is why it's important to keep our older versions just in case something happens. All right. I've had on occasion that I've needed to do this. And I'm always thankful that I always have those backup files to refer to. So save yourself a headache. Learn a good naming convention for your business that works for you and save all of those. Then if you are struggling for space, you know you could go through and delete most of these drafts. I would keep concepts, and then you could delete some of the older finals. All right, so now what I'm going to do, finals, old. I'm just going to save this out. And then I'm going to move all of these ones to this folder. And then the last 3 remaining are my final files. And I actually don't need this topic list anymore. So now I have a clean folder structure. Now, you'll see this one. It's an IDML file, InDesign markup document. Anytime I have a file that produces an error, such as the one that just happened, if I have to revert back to an older file of it, I will automatically save it as an IDML file, because a lot of times with IDML files, any errors that are in the document will be cleared up by saving it in that IDML file. Then you can open up the IDML file and everything will update and you will be okay. It's kind of like a backup. So in cases that I do have errors in files, that's what I'll do. So don't be, if you always are struggling with storage space, be sure to invest in an external hard drive and make sure you have some sort of backup system built with that external hard drive. I know a lot of people use Backblaze, which is great, some sort of cloud backup. You could use another external drive to back up, or you could do something like I do where you have a 2-drive NAS system. So anyway, then going back to file conventions, what I prefer to do is that my files I save with the book name, Becoming a Dog Mom. I always have a folder for the client. And in a lot of cases, if I have a client that I do multiple books for, let me give you an example. I will have folders for each of those book titles, or if it's a series, I'll have a folder for the series and then each individual book under that series. This one I do not have set up that way. So those are the things that you need to think about when saving your files. And then Melissa, let's look at this again. For hers, you'll notice the concepts, it still has the book title, and then I call it interior because I also worked on a cover file for her, so I know the difference whether it was an interior or a cover file. And then what it was, so this is a concept, and what number it was. So the number of concept also helps her tell me, like if I did 4 concepts, I had concept O1, O2, O3, O4, I send them to her and she can tell me, oh, I like concept O3 the best. And then if she says, I like concept 3 the best, but can you make these little tweaks to 3? I will save it as 3, but I will add a letter to it. So 3A. So we know it was still concept 3. This is just another reiteration of concept 3. That way, if she says, oh, I don't like that change, let's go back to concept 3. I still have concept 3, so I don't have to go back and redo that change in concept 3. All right. Then once we get into the draft stage, I save my files, again, with the book title and interior, and then draft, and then the number. And so anytime she sends me edits, I will send her a new file with the next number. All right, so you don't have to go through the naming convention, updated, 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 updated to, however you want to do it. If you stick to this naming convention, draft 01, draft 02, draft 03, you can go on and on to infinity with the numbers, which works out the best. And the difference between draft and final is that my draft is not print ready, whereas my final is print ready. So if we go look at the finals, all of these are already set up with the bleed. All right. My draft files do not have the bleed in the PDF. So that helps me know if I call it final, that means I know that it has the bleed in it as long as I did it properly. Then let's say a year from now she comes back to me and needs to do an update. I just continue numbering from the final point and continue to build that bleed every time so I know final is. Now, in some cases, somebody may come back and say, hey, I have a new version. What can I do? What can we do? Sometimes I'll restart it and just go back to 1. And I will say the book name, and sometimes I'll say new, sometimes I'll say revised, or I'll say edition 2, and then continue with the draft and the final naming conventions. But that's usually only if I know we're going to go through a lot of reiterations of the file. So I hope that helps. To me, if you're doing this as a business, that's the most important thing, is making sure at the beginning you set up a good file structure and a good naming convention. And also have the storage for all those files. All right, that's it for me. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.